screen and get interpretation in Spanish or Vietnamese. Let us know if you are in the interpretation channel. You could post a quick something in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and that would be very helpful for the interpreters to let them know if you're listening in. And you can also provide them feedback in the Q&A throughout the meeting if need be. All right, why don't we get started? So a little house rules today on how to use Zoom if you've never been part of a Zoom meeting or a Zoom webinar. For our attendees tonight, you can rename yourself if you are affiliated with an organization or a company, should you so choose. We'll be using the Q&A this evening as an interactive way for you all to share your comments and questions with the project team. We'll be collecting your comments and questions, and we'll have 3 opportunities to respond to those questions throughout the meeting. The first 2 Q&As will be polling questions and reading them aloud to the group. If time allows, we'll allow people to raise their hands. And we've reserved 20 to 30 minutes at the end of the meeting to have some robust discussion, and you'll have the abilities to raise your hand, and we'll be reading questions during that time as well. So we ask that everyone just stays on mute unless you're called upon when you raise your hand during the Q&A session. We will be recording this meeting tonight so that we can post it publicly on our website for those that could not attend with us tonight. And we just wanted to make that announcement known to our participants. So a few features of Zoom. Down at the bottom of your screen, you have the ability to raise your hand, to ask Q&A questions and answers in the Q&A box, and to unmute yourself. You'll receive a notification on your screen, and you can click unmute myself when you're called upon. If you ever have any feedback for us or having any difficulties, you can post those questions in the Q&A, and a team member will get back to you. So you are hopefully all in the right place. This is a meeting tonight about the Central Bikeway. We're really happy that you're sharing some of your time with us this evening. This is the project team, some of the project team members. My name's Brent Purse. I work for the Valley Transportation Authority. I'm a transportation planner and the lead project manager for VTA on this project.
Hi, everybody. My name's Emily Duchan, and I'm a principal at Alta Planning and Design. And I'm the project manager for the technical team that's supporting VTA in the study.
Jackie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Jackie Franco. I'm a co-founder and owner of Meta LLC, and we're supporting this project with outreach.
And we have a lot of other team members on the call tonight that will be sharing with you all. We have Libby and Donnie from the Alta team who will be speaking as part of the presentation tonight. We have Karen from our outreach group at VTA and Lauren also from the planning team at VTA. And we have some partners on the call tonight as well in case any special questions arise. Carol from the city of Santa Clara and Elliot from Caltrans. And I did want to reintroduce to Andy and Sandy, who are interpreters this evening. So thank you both for joining us as well. We could not deliver projects like this if it wasn't for partnerships. Having great partners makes strong projects. And there are a lot of partners involved in this project that we'll be speaking to you about tonight. We have the city of San Jose, the county of Santa Clara, the city of Santa Clara, and Caltrans is all partners working with VTA to deliver this multi-jurisdictional project. We're going to be covering a few things today. For those that were able to attend our first round of meetings in the fall, We talked to you a lot about visions and goals and what the timeline would be for our overall Central Bikeway project. We collected a lot of feedback in the first round through an online mapping tool and through surveys, and we're going to share with you all a little bit about that feedback that we heard from you in the first round. And then later in the presentation, we'll be diving into 3 separate alternatives and checking in with you all about where we are on the project today. And we really hope to collect some feedback and give you all the ability to ask questions about the project this evening.
Hi, Brent. I just wanted to let everybody know that in the Q&A box, we have posted links to the presentation in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese. So feel free to go to the Q&A box if you would like to download this presentation that we're giving today in any language that's offered, any of those 4 languages.
Great. Thanks for that reminder, Emily. Jackie, did you want to share a little bit about our principles that we've worked on together with the community tonight?
Yeah, so I'm gonna just read through. These are our engagement principles. For those that speak Spanish, we call them like valores. They're kind of values that we kind of work by and did it like and partner with. First of all, actively reach underrepresented communities. Something that I think the CBOs and I that are doing outreach really are committed to, as well as building trust and respect with the community. Making the work relevant. Another principle is you speak and we listen. And lastly, not to lose sight of joy. And then with that, Brent, I think we're going to go on to our first poll of today. And then just as like a background, VTA collects this type of demographic information to really help inform decisions during our project planning and transit service delivery. This way we can adjust our outreach strategy for this bikeway based on the information that we collect if a certain community or population is not being represented. And the information is always kept private and it's optional.
So this will be our first poll for the evening. We'll have a series of polls that we're going to be asking some interactive questions of you all. And this is a good way to test out the tool. We'll give you another moment to finish, and then we'll read back the results. All right. Where are we in the participation there, Libby? Are we almost done? I know you're working behind the scenes.
Yeah, we'll give people 10 more seconds. It looks like about 5 of you haven't responded.
Great. Okay, here are results. We recognize that some people are on mobile devices perhaps tonight, and so the poll does take up the full screen. We apologize for that. But you're able to see all the results of who's here and who's in our virtual space tonight. So we have a pretty good spread of age, from 18 to 74. Both men and women. We do have more men in the audience tonight than we do women. And we have quite a bit of participants who are identifying as Hispanic or Latino origin. That's great. We really love a diverse set of opinions, and we really want to co-create this bikeway with the community. So we want all types of observations and comments. And that's great. Okay, let's move forward. Thank you, everyone. So how did we get to the Central Bikeway? And what is a Central Bikeway? What is a bicycle superhighway? often questions that we get that you haven't participated in our planning and outreach process yet. We developed this idea of bicycle superhighways in our countywide bike plan in 2018. And our countywide bike plan is a document that helps us do long-range planning for bicycles in the county. We're really lucky to have so many different types of bike facilities in the South Bay. It's pretty amazing when you see a number like 800 miles of bikeways currently exist and almost 200 miles of bike paths. It's really nice to experience some of these paths and have safe places to ride and cross our county. And we're hoping that the Central Bikeway can build on that with our partners, creating a high quality, low stress facility to move people across the county. So the Central Bikeway, which we're going to talk about tonight in detail, is one of our corridors that goes east-west across the county. VTA is also helping to lead and put together an implementation plan county-wide that's really going to look at 12 ultimate corridors or bicycle superhighway corridors to move people in other places in the county as well. We really see bike superhighways as really high quality bike facilities that are joyful, provide connections to users throughout the county. And a key part of a bike superhighway is that it provides protection or separation from vehicle traffic, either in a trail setting or an on-street configuration where you may have a divider or barrier between you and a vehicle or a pedestrian even. Next slide. So this is the Central Bikeway study area. This is where we've been spending a lot of our time and effort. The Central Bikeway study area was selected for many reasons. It has 3 really existing high quality trails already in it that travel north-south. That's the San Tomas Aquino Trail on the left, the Guadalupe River Trail in the middle of the map, and the Coyote Creek Trail on the right side of the map. It also has great transit connectivity with connections to the Barrios BART station in San Jose and the Santa Clara and Lawrence stations in Santa Clara and Sunnyvale. Lawrence is actually in both cities. And when we heard from people in 2018, 2017 in developing the Bikeway plan, we learned that the community really felt there was a gap in this east-west travel for bicycles in the county. And the Central Corridor was really identified as a way to help knit together some of these great north-south corridors that we have today, and also address this major barrier in the middle of the airport, which we'll focus on a little bit later tonight, which is the airport. Do we go around the airport to the north, or do we go around the airport to the south? So we're going to be asking you some questions about that later this evening. A bicycle superhighway is something that should provide a joyful, continuous, connected, and comfortable bikeway between Santa Clara and North San Jose. And this vision was created with input from all of our project partners and from the public during our first round of outreach. We have 7 goals for our project. These goals are being used to evaluate the alternatives, the 3 alternatives that we're going to be talking to you in more detail about today. They cover things from equity, safety, which we've heard a lot about, having options and access to things in our community. Does this bikeway represent other ways that we've also participated in? So our cities also have their own bike plans, and we know that many of you have maybe provided feedback to those processes as well. So is this project compatible with those? And does it make us happy? Is it joyful? I'm going to throw in the word joy as much as I can tonight. It makes me smile. It makes me happy. And when I ride my bicycle, I like to be happy and feel good while I'm doing it. So we've developed this criteria of joy to also help us evaluate the Central Bikeway. We are kind of almost midway through the project. This is a really critical junction for the project right now, where we're looking at 3 different options and trying to determine how we get to one preferred alternative that we'll be able to study in more detail. So we're at that second bullet on the slide there, where we're reviewing multiple alignments, trying to move towards that third bullet this summer. We'll be selecting one alternative to study in more detail, and eventually coming back to the community sometime this summer or early fall to show you the results of what that final alternative will look like eventually. So your feedback is really critical today. All right, our first Q&A break. I think Jackie's going to help ask some questions for us all, and if we have a little time, we'll maybe be able to take some hands.
Looking at the Q&A right now, I don't see any questions, so we can go ahead and see if there's any hands raised.
Okay, that's great. Does anyone have a question so far about the introduction? If so, you can raise your hand at the bottom. Okay, great. And I'll just take this opportunity too. If anyone is receiving interpretation, it would be great if you could just let us know in the Q&A so our interpreters have an idea that someone is listening to them.
Yeah, I'm seeing 2 questions. One of them is asking, what will you be able to do with the money?
So maybe this question has to do with how we'll fund the project, perhaps. And right now we have funding to basically do what we call a concept design. And that really sets up the Central Bikeway for future grant funding or funding sources that we can work on with our partners to actually help finish the design and build the Bikeway one day. But right now, the ultimate goal of this study will not be to construct the Bikeway. It will be just to create an early concept for it. So we don't have it fully funded through construction.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I'm looking at another question. I think it might have gone with the first one because the question was new infrastructure studies, etc. And then another question we have is this envisioned to be the first in a series of bike highways?
That's a great question. The Central Bikeway is the first bike superhighway in the South Bay. There may be some other similar facilities like this across the country, but this project is really going to set a lot of standards and create a lot of precedents for future bike highways that we may work on in the county and even the Bay Area. Our partner Caltrans is also working on a region-wide study that is looking at routes and other options to connect bike superhighways all across our 9-county region.
Okay, we have one more question before.
Take one more.
Is Central Bikeway to complement or replace other EW corridors like 237 and San Fernando?
Great question. So we had a similar question yesterday. The Central Bikeway is, maybe as you see more of the alternatives, it's really meant to complement some of the east-west routes that our city partners and county partner have already been working on or developing on. So each city has their own bike plan and has identified some of the routes or streets that we'll talk about tonight as bikeways. The Central Bikeway builds on some of those concepts by maybe providing more amenities or features or other levels of protection that make you feel safe as a rider on the street or on a trail. All right, thank you for your questions. Why don't we move forward and we'll get into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, thanks everybody for your questions so far. So we we do want to share some of the things that we learned during our first round of community engagement. And so I just want to give a minute to Jackie from Meta and Jillian from the Guadalupe River Park Conservancy, who are our two CBO partners working in conjunction with Silicon Valley Bike Coalition to help with our outreach efforts. So it'd be great to hear from you both, just to share some of the events and activities that you did during the first round and that you'll be continuing to do through the month of March and April. So Jackie, do you want to go first?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Jillian, go ahead.
Hi, guys. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. As they said, I am the Guadalupe River Park Conservancy representative for this evening. During our first round of this survey, our primary outreach has been in the form of social media. We've engaged primarily via Facebook and Twitter regarding the survey, and we've provided survey links and meeting updates to keep our followers in the loop for the Central Bikeway meetings. Furthermore, we've given additional updates via our newsletter, where we update our GRPC members as to projects occurring within our park and our community. Finally, we utilized our close connections to the San Jose State University Urban Planning Department to get the word around to both faculty and students, since bikeways are a really hot topic in urban planning. And we will be continuing to do these efforts in the next round of community engagement. And we're also doing some more physical placements of decals and signage within the park to further drum some engagement and excitement around the Central Bikeway study and the potential to get involved with it.
And then we are also CBO on outreach, and our I think primarily means of how we've been doing outreach has been more in person. Meta has focused on meeting people where they are, where we know that they're either going to get a service, or food, and so really doing flyering and outreach at food distributions. We've even partnered with at FRCs where they're giving diaper distribution, schools that give out lunch. And now I think on the upside, we're also having to shift a little bit because of COVID and learning how to do more social media, Facebook, WhatsApp, any way that we can get the message out. We're trying to give a little bit of everything to make sure that we're reaching that all types of community, especially underrepresented communities.
Great, thanks for those updates. So we can dive into the details a little bit about who we heard from during our first round. So we hosted 2 virtual community meetings, similar to how we're doing yesterday and today, with a total of 66 attendees. And we also hosted an online open house in 4 languages, which had almost 1,000 visits and collected about 1,700 comments on our mapping activities. So this is a diverse study area, and we compared the racial groups who completed the survey with census data in the study area. And we found that 41% of our survey respondents were white, which is an overrepresentation compared to the 36% of the population that's white in the study area. And we also saw underrepresentation from Asian and Hispanic populations, with only 20% and 17% compared to 46 and 24% of the population reported in the census. So this round of engagement, our CBO partners are really helping with outreach and engagement efforts in the community so we can better represent the people who live in the study area. And we're going to keep working at it. So please help us in getting the word out and sharing links to our survey. So we heard that safety was a top priority goal for the Central Bikeway, and we're taking that into consideration as we develop some of these preliminary alternatives and then screen them to the 3 alternatives we're sharing with you today. That was followed by community desired projects, sustainable mobility, access, and providing joy. So we heard that personal safety from traffic, bikeways not connecting with desired locations, a lack of secure bike parking, uncomfortable bikeways, and personal safety concerns related to things like crime, people living outside, and darkness. Those were all barriers that prevented people from biking more often. So those are some of the challenges that we're trying to overcome as we start to think about this bike superhighway corridor. We collected information on challenging areas, and the top two challenges were really related to insufficient infrastructure or lack of on-street bikeways or bikeways off-street, as well as challenging intersections. So we also collected information on the destinations that you wanted to reach by bike, and this great collection of destinations will be used as we evaluate how well various alternatives connect to these community desired destinations, both along the Central Bikeway directly, as well as being able to access them from local bikeways off of the Central Bikeway corridor. So finally, community members were asked to draw their preferred route for the Central Bikeway. So you can see there's a lot of preferences on the map along Heading, Taylor, and Penitencia Creek in San Jose. And then in the Santa Clara area, El Camino, Monroe, and Central Expressway to the Guadalupe River Trail also saw a lot of preferences. And so we dug into this information in greater detail, and we really used this community feedback to help develop the alternatives that we're sharing with you today and then asking for your feedback. So Donnie's going to go through this in a little bit more detail and talk about the process we used to develop the alternatives.
Great. Thanks, Emily. So how did we develop these three alternatives? We started out by analyzing street and trail corridors. We then connected these corridors into cohesive and continuous 8-mile bike superhighway routes from end to end across the study area. And then finally, we identified and refined the alignments into three alternatives that best responded to the project goals and to the stakeholder and public feedback. In a little more detail, I'm going to just whiz through that process. So first, we studied the major corridors identified in local plans. We then explored additional corridors that were also feasible. Most notably, we looked at the Caltrain corridor in Santa Clara and the freeway corridors along the 880 and 101 freeways. We then identified additional little corridors that helped to close critical gaps between these larger connections, which led to the creation of a network that we use to develop different bike superhighway options. We then compared that network to community identified destinations from the first round of public outreach to see which corridors connected best to certain destinations. And we also compared them to the community identified routes from the first round of outreach to see which corridors best aligned with the lines that people drew of their preferred route. And all that process combined led to the selection of three alternatives that best responded to the project goals and also to the community input. So throughout this alternative development process, we've been exploring the bikeway types that are feasible and desirable for each alternative. And on this slide, the three bikeway types shown are the ones that were most highlighted by the community in the first round of outreach. And they also make up the vast majority of the bikeway types shown on the three alternatives. On the left side are protected bikeways shown with the red line. These are on-street bikeway types that feature a buffer between the bikeway and parked cars or travel lanes. For Central Bikeway, we're considering both one-way protected bikeways shown on the left and two-way protected bikeways shown in the center on different corridors. The third primary bikeway type is a trail, which is off-street and is fully separated from vehicles and most commonly located along creek or rail corridors. And each alternative that we're going to show on the next couple of slides is made up of multiple bikeway types. So you're going to see the red lines and the green lines to represent protected bikeways or trails. And with that, let's jump onto the three alternatives. The first of the three we call the Walsh Wizard, This one is 78% protected bikeway, shown in red, and 22% trail. It's unique in being the only one of the three that travels north of the San Jose International Airport. Of the three, it has the slowest travel time from end to end and connects to key destinations, including Lawrence Caltrain Station, the airport, Japantown, and Berryessa BART Station. The second alternative is the trail trackway. This one you can see tons of green lines all over the study area. This one's 94% trail, so heavily off street, and only about 6% protected bikeway. Of the three, it's the second quickest alternative and connects to Lawrence Caltrain Station, Santa Clara Caltrain Station, Santa Clara University, and Berryessa BART Station. The third one, in contrast to the previous one, this one has a lot more red lines, a lot more protected bikeway. It has 97% protected bikeway. Of the three, it has the quickest travel time from end to end and connects to Santa Clara Caltrain Station, Santa Clara University, Japantown, and Berryessa BART Station.
Thanks, Donnie. That was a good overview of these three corridors, and we'll be diving in much more detail further on in the presentation. But Donnie just described some of the differences between the alternatives, and there are trade-offs between them. And so we're going to launch a poll here where we want to know what would help you choose riding on the Central Bikeway over using another mode. So there's two questions on this poll to consider two different trade-offs. So each question asks the same question, but number one is looking at trade-offs between a route with a short travel time or a route that connects to more destinations. And number two, we want to know if a protected on-street bikeway or an off-street trail would help you choose riding on the Central Bikeway over using another mode. So to quickly recap that again, the first option is a trade-off between a route that's quick with a short travel time or a route that would connect you to more destinations. So we know trade-offs are hard, and you may have a different reason, and you can certainly select that option. And if you want to share more about what that other reason is, please put it in the Q&A box, and we can talk about it more during discussion. And then the second one is looking at the trade-offs between having a protected on-street bikeway or an off-street trail. And these are trade-offs that would help you choose riding on the Central Bikeway. So once you've made your selection, you'll see a blue submit button highlight, and you can go ahead and send your questions in, and in just a minute we'll post the answers, and Libby can highlight what people's preferences for their trade-offs were. So I think we have a pretty good percentage of folks who voted, 83%.
Yeah, so it looks like the crew at this meeting strongly prefers a route that connects to more destinations as compared to shorter travel time. So 80% of folks here are looking at destinations. One person did suggest a different reason, so if you'd like to drop that in the Q&A, please feel free. When comparing protected on-street bikeway versus trails, looks like about 60% of people prefer the on-street bikeways, 30% prefer the trails, and we have 10% preferring another option. Again, feel free to drop that into the Q&A for us to hear about. Thank you.
Great, thanks for sharing. Okay, we have another poll that we want to follow up with you all about. So here, our next poll is really looking at, when the poll gets launched, it's going to look a little bit different because it's in 3 languages. It's all the same question repeated in just 3 different languages. So please just answer the question in your own language and then choose skip on the other languages. So the submit button will turn blue. So this poll is asking, is just really letting everybody know that really some alternatives may take more time to build. So we want to hear from you if you prefer a bikeway that can be built more quickly using the street network, or a bikeway that may require more time to build and provide off-street trail corridors. Again, you can have perhaps you prefer a different option, and you can select that choice. And so one feature of Zoom polls is that you're required to answer every question before the submit button is highlighted. So just a reminder to please choose the skip option on the languages that you're not voting in. So maybe give people 10 more seconds to make their choice on looking at the trade-offs between a bikeway that can be built more quickly using the street network, or a bikeway that might require more time to build and provide off-street trail corridors.
Hard decisions. We don't want to make it easy for you all.
Yeah. So I think we can go ahead, and Libby, you can share the results.
Yeah, so it looks like we have a pretty even split between the two options, although if we add up the answers from all the various languages, it looks like the more time to build an off-street trail corridor takes a little bit of a lead, but overall, it looks like this group is pretty evenly split.
Great. So we're sharing 3 alternatives and as a whole, but we really want to hear from you how to knit together the best alternatives to meet your needs. So we'll be looking at these alternatives in 3 areas. So in Santa Clara, around the airport, and in San Jose. And so we understand that the preferred alternative may be a hybrid alternative between these 3 areas. And that's some of the feedback that we're going to be given or asking about you today. And we're really interested to know if there is a particular area you would ride most often. Maybe it's the whole thing, or maybe it's just one segment that it's most relevant to your daily needs. So we'll go ahead and launch that poll. Feel free to select all options that are relevant. We understand that this is about an 8-mile corridor, and so the bike superhighway corridors are looking at providing options for longer bike rides to be able to reach destinations that are further out, but they can also support smaller trips within that as well. So I think we have a good percentage of people who voted.
Yeah, it looks like nearly everybody here wants to be riding in San Jose, followed by Santa Clara, with fewer people looking to ride around the airport. And good news, everyone here, no one voted for none of these, so everyone here wants to ride somewhere in the corridor. Again, with most of you looking at San Jose.
And maybe later on I know it would be helpful for the team to understand why we had low response on the airport. What is it about the airport that maybe is a challenge for you all? So that would be very helpful for us. If you could post some of those things, we could talk about them.
Okay. It's good timing because we have a Q&A break.
Speaking of talking about things.
Jackie, do you have some questions to share?
Yeah, it looks like we have 2 questions / comments. I could read the first one. For the Guadalupe Trail, it would be great to have better lighting in some sections, especially for night riding.
Yeah, that's a great comment. We hear that a lot about our trails, particularly trails along creeks or wildlife corridors, that they get dark at night. We are interested in this facility being, available as much of the day as possible. We also have to recognize that lighting along, wildlife or natural corridors can also sometimes pose their own challenges. So it's something that we're definitely thinking of as a team. Is there anything else you'd like to add about lighting, Emily?
Okay. And then we have another comment. Scenic trails are great, but trails like that along 87 south of Willow is not. And then by that same participant, we have a question. Why does the north of the airport have to cross US 101 twice? There is an airport alignment existing could improve.
Great comments. Yeah, the existing Highway 87 bike path does have some challenges. You know, it was built decades ago. It was actually amazing that it got built at the time that it did. So, you know, it's narrow. It has limited access points, and those are some of the trade-offs that we're talking about here today in designing the bikeway. With regards to going north around the airport, the alignment that's selected for the Walsh Wizard in orange there has identified using what will be a new interchange that VTA is constructing, which we call the Trimble de la Cruz interchange. So it will actually be using a class 1, which is basically an off-street path, multi-use path for bikes and peds to go over the freeway interchange and provide a protected bikeway on Trimble to connect users to the Guadalupe River Trail. We acknowledge that, you know, the airport has another alternative roadway around its north side, and we are open ears, open book to hear comments on how you may want to use that.
Okay, we have 2 more comments and then a question. Just I think referring to what you were asking, Brent, we have a participant saying that perhaps many people are not aware of the airport path. Another comment for the Guadalupe Trail, the lighting will help prevent surprises of homeless people who reside nearby. And I don't know if you want to respond to that. And then just a last, one of the other questions was asking if Valley Fair and Santana Row were looked at as a destination.
All great comments, yeah. Particularly lighting, right? It serves so many functions. It helps you navigate, but it also maybe helps certain users feel safer while they're on the trail. And so we'd like to know, you know, would you like an entire alignment, possibly in a trail segment lit? Would you like just the entrances to help you find the bikeway lit? So those would be some reactions I would have on lighting. And I'm trying to remember the other one, the other comment, Jackie.
Asking if Valley Fair and Santana Row were looked at as a destination.
Valley Fair and Santana Row have not specifically come up. They're probably just outside the study area. So one of the things that we are looking at, though, as part of the Central Bikeway study and as part of all 3 of these alternatives are, where do these lines you see on the map connect with other bikeways that could take you to other large regional destinations like Valley Fair or Diridon Station in San Jose or job centers in North San Jose. So that is definitely as part of the study effort, even if these 3 lines won't take you directly there. All right, I think that's good. I know we probably have a lot more questions and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. We'd like to walk you through the 3 alternatives in a little bit more detail and ask you some more questions.
Yeah, thanks, Brent. So yeah, we're gonna dive in, and so we have these 3 alternatives, and we also have 3 areas. So now we're going to share more about each alternative in each of these 3 areas and really ask your preferences. So this information will help us understand if we need to knit areas together in different ways to build a bikeway that best meets your needs. So we're going to start in Santa Clara. And just sort of an overview here, we have the green line showing the Central Expressway to the Caltrain corridor. The yellow line is Kiefer Road to Walsh Ave to Martin Avenue. And then the purple line is El Camino Real. So the first alternative in the Santa Clara segment is part of the Trail Trackway. So it's along Central Expressway. And the Central Bikeway could be a trail in the center median. So it would be protected from vehicles and provide access at selected intersections. We recognize that, cars travel quickly along this corridor. And so we're exploring opportunities to have grade separated or elevated structures or underpasses through heavily traveled intersections. This trail corridor would have separate throughways for people biking and people walking, so that the active transportation users in the center who would be traveling different speeds would have their own space. So this alternative would utilize the San Tomas Aquino Trail to connect from Central Expressway south to the Caltrain or railroad corridor, where we're really just exploring the feasibility of a trail with rail that would be alongside the south side of the corridor. Now, we do understand that this corridor has future plans for high-speed rail coming through. And so, you could think about when you're sharing your preferences, we're showing here sort of a barrier wall in between, but, we'd love to hear about your thoughts of being in this corridor, which would have, in the future, much heavier or more frequent trains, as well as trains going at higher speeds. So the second alternative is part of the Walsh Wizard. And this is where the Central Bikeway could be a one-way or a two-way protected bikeway shown in this rendering along Kiefer Road and Walsh Avenue. And then the third alternative is part of the short liner. And this is showing a one-way protected bikeway that's in sync with the El Camino specific plan. And this alternative would remove on-street parking to create a physical buffer between cars and the bikeway. So here we're gonna get some feedback from you again, and we really want to know which route you prefer in Santa Clara. So there's three options, and the first, if you vote for number 1, that's the Central Expressway and the Caltrain corridor. Number 2 is along Kiefer Walsh, and number 3 is using El Camino Real. We understand you might have more than one preference, so feel free to share that in the Q&A. We know we're only giving you one option to vote for, and so, feel free to share more about that in the Q&A or at the end of the presentation when we have time for some back and forth conversation. So Libby, let's see how folks voted for this question.
Very exciting. Oh.
So it looks like it's a close vote. Central Expressway Caltrain Rail Corridor won out with half the votes. El Camino in a very close second. And then Kiefer Walsh is the least preferred route from this group.
Okay. This is your first taste, everyone. We'll get to do 2 more of these for the 2 remaining segments. I'll be covering around the airport tonight, our big barrier in the center of the study area. We wanted to make sure that we looked at alternatives that went both north around the airport and south around the airport. This has been a hot conversation to date about what direction we go, and we'd like to really know from you all tonight what your preferences are. So the Guadalupe River Trail in orange is part of the Walsh Wizard. Hopefully that name makes you laugh a little bit. It's meant to stand out so you can remember it. It will be in a trail-like setting along the eastern border of the airport. And in purple, along Coleman and Airport Boulevard, and eventually Caltrans Freeway right away, we'll have a trail. This is part of the Trail Trackway. It would include on and off ramps for bicycles onto the trail section to get you into the highway right away in several places, and it would extend further east into San Jose along the I-880 and US 101 corridor. And then the third option, is heading in San Jose and Alameda and El Camino and Santa Clara, and this would be an all on-street protected bikeway. So now we can show you what these will look like. So this is a visual of the Guadalupe River Trail. It looks a little different than it does today, with potentially lighting along the trail in strategic places. Also note the separation of the pedestrians and the bicycles that does not exist today along the Guadalupe Trail, where those two users are mixed in the same space. Just a reminder that for bicycle superhighways, we want to have a dedicated space for bicycles along the entire alignment, if at all possible. And then south around the airport, this is what a potential corridor could look like in our freeway, along our freeways, along Airport Boulevard, I-880 and US 101, in a trail-like setting with a barrier and maybe potentially a sound wall or landscaping that doesn't exist today. And then our third option around the airport is our most southern option as part of the short liner. This is an all on-street facility using the Alameda and heading. Remember that this has the most available points of access to get onto the bikeway. It provides more access to destinations than either the other two trail-like alternatives along the Guadalupe or along the freeways. So there's more points of destination and more ways to access the bikeway along heading. And shown here in the rendering, we would have some type of protection for you to separate you from vehicle traffic and pedestrians. So we'll bring up the poll. And again, we're going to ask you, recognizing that you may ride on all of these, but which type of setting or location do you think you would prefer? What would be your preference to get around the airport? Remember, the Guadalupe River Trail will be on a trail-like setting. It has limited points of access. The freeway corridor would also be a trail with potentially limited points of access, but would provide you with on or off ramps to get into it. And Heading Street would be an all on-street protected bikeway with more access and destinations.
All right, it looks like we have a pretty even split from the crowd here tonight, with a tie for the freeway corridor and Heading Street, and then nearly Guadalupe River Trail and a close third. Please feel free to share any context for your vote in the question and answer box. It looks like this one's a tie.
Yeah, this is and a little bit different than participants from yesterday. I think it was a little bit more weighted towards heading, if I don't recall.
Great. And for the last bit, I'll be walking through the San Jose options. So in San Jose, there's kind of a west side and an east side in terms of the options. On the west side, two of the corridors, the Walsh Wizard and the Shortliner, both follow Heading Street. And the trail trackway, as Brent alluded to previously, would follow along the freeway corridors. On the more eastern side of San Jose, northeastern side, the three main options we'd be looking at are Berryessa Road with a one-way protected bikeway, Penitencia Creek Trail, which would be a widened trail with separate bike and pedestrian paths, and Mayberry Road with a one-way protected bikeway as well. So along Berryessa Road, this gives a little picture of what it might look like. Again, it's one-way protected bikeway. So currently there are bike lanes along Berryessa Road. This plan would look to expand those and provide a bit more separation from vehicles, either in the form of a curb or potentially a planted buffer like what's shown here. Penitentia Creek Trail currently has a shared use trail where bicyclists and pedestrians share the same space. So this would be looking to widen that facility and provide separate space for bidirectional bicycle travel, moving a little faster, and then space alongside it for people to walk and enjoy the trail at slower speeds. And then thirdly is Mayberry. This is very similar condition to Berryessa, where there are currently bike lanes. So it'd be looking to widen it a little bit, provide a bit more barrier in the form of curbs or some kind of delineation from cars along the length of it. So we're going to have you all vote for those northeasternmost options, protected bikeway along Berryessa, trail along Penitentia Creek, or potentially a protected bikeway along Mayberry Road. Looks like we're about 71% in. A few people haven't quite yet voted.
All right, it looks like, again, we have a pretty split audience here tonight, but Berryessa Road takes the lead with about half of you choosing that route for your preference, followed by Mayberry and then Penitentia Creek Trail. Again, please feel free to share any feedback in the Q&A on your votes. Thank you.
And I'll share back with you all. Last night, I think Penitentia Creek Trail led the way by far. It was almost 70 or 80% of the participants preferred a more trail-like segment in San Jose. So we definitely have some different types of riders or potential users here this evening. All right, just wanted to say we're getting great questions and comments and answers in the Q&A, and I can't wait to get to those. We're almost done here. We're almost wrapping up. So thank you for staying glued to your screens with us this evening. We really still want to get the word out about Central Bikeway. We have a few more weeks to collect feedback from the community. We have, as of a day or two ago, received over 800 survey responses already, which we're really happy about, and we'd like to see that expand even further. So we would really ask, if you haven't done our more detailed survey online, that you do so. Share with your friends, your networks on social media, your family. We have flyers available on our website, should you like to print those out or give them to groups or friends. And our survey is available in 4 languages: English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese as well. So I covered a little bit about this earlier, but for our outreach process, we're about halfway through the overall process. We're going to take all this great feedback that we're getting from our survey on our alternatives and from your participation in the meeting tonight and from our participants yesterday, and really think hard about your comments and questions and how we should make changes to the alternatives or modify them based on comments that we've received. We really see this as the most collaborative part of the project, where we can really co-create a project and come up with a preferred alternative that meets most people's needs based on the feedback that we've received throughout this process. So we really thank you. And we plan to come back out this summer with a preferred alternative where you'll have an opportunity to provide more feedback. And maybe one day we'll get to do something in person with you all. Cross our fingers. Maybe you'll be able to see us out at a pop-out in the community, at a pop-up event in the community this summer, or maybe at an open streets event like Viva Calle, should that get to happen this fall. So think about other ways that we can connect with people. Our ears are open, our hearts are open. Jackie's talked about meeting people where they are. It's really a challenge during this time. So if you have ideas for us, please put them in the Q&A, or you'll be able to email us. We'll share that, I believe, on the next slide.
And I also wanted to just mention that our partners, the Bike Coalition, Meta, and the Guadalupe River Park Conservancy, are hosting virtual pop-ups where they will attend an existing community meeting that might be happening. So if you're part of a group that is having a meeting, we'd love to hear about it. We could come give a short presentation and lead folks through the survey and be available to answer more questions. So please feel free to share that with us, and we'd love to hear more about other smaller meetings that are happening in the community that we could get the word out and show up and interact with your members in any way.
Okay, so we've got about 30 minutes left. I know usually there's not this much time. Usually the presentation goes long, but we've really tried to keep on schedule so we have some time to answer questions and comments. We haven't actually heard from anyone yet, so I'm going to mix it up, team. I think I'm going to take a few hands from the audience first, maybe 1 or 2 hands, and then we'll, our team's been working in the background to group some of the questions. We have a lot of questions about specific alignments, so I think maybe we'll try to take them in chunks tonight. Talk about the El Camino with you all, then maybe talk about heading, talk about the airport, and so forth. So if anyone would like to raise their hand, I see one person. Chris, why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself? Thanks for being the first. Okay, you can press unmute, Chris.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, great. So I am a 100% bike and mass transit commuter. And so I have ridden along many of these different pathways already. One of the reasons I think airport, just you said this earlier, get such a kind of a low billing is, one, it doesn't connect, or going north of the airport, it doesn't connect to a lot of things other than the businesses up there. And also when you get down to the airport where it connects, it's also extremely confusing. I know you guys would have to rebuild that, but that is not a very friendly area of knowing which way to go. So signage and stuff would be very important around there. I also think the El Camino street is horrible to bike on currently, and it would benefit the most from a super bikeway, as well as the Berryessa side of the San Jose piece. And then the Alameda area that connects to the El Camino Royale meets most of the getting to restaurants and things like that, a lot of things that you need, as well as the El Camino piece of it. The one question I do have, though, in all this is that with all these pictures, there was very few two-way on the street bike access areas. And one of the things I have seen out in the community as a whole, not just from bikers, but with people who might rent a Lyft or rent a bike or do anything like that, or even those like scooters and stuff, is that they don't always know the rules of the road. And they don't know to get on the side of the bike trail, even when there's an arrow pointing.
Right.
Where I think the two-way on the street bike lanes would resolve some of that worrisome issue. The question comes in is, why are those so underrepresented in this map? Is it mainly because of literal physical location of the streets? Or is there another, they're just not as practical in the valley area?
Yeah, thanks for those comments. We'll take those preferences and thoughts on El Camino, Berryessa, and Airport Road. So appreciate that, and I'll let Emily take the question on the two-way protected cycle track there.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So two-way cycle tracks do offer benefits in actually sort of consolidating some of the space needed for a protected bikeway along a corridor, because you don't have to have the space for buffers on both sides of the street. So, but where you start to see when we have really long block lengths, we've heard and we've seen folks, have to ride out of direction to be able to access the two-way cycle track that's just on one side of the street. And so our partners have shared that there is a preference, if we're looking at two-way cycle track facilities on one side of the street, to be able to provide a shoulder for riders going in the other direction on the other side of the street. So then we start to need more space to be able to provide that sort of condition. The other consideration for two-way cycle tracks are when you get to intersections. So when you have one-way intersection, it's much more aligned with current signal operations, and the movements are more similar to how vehicles are moving through the intersection. But when you introduce a two-way cycle track on one side of the road, you do need dedicated signals to be able to get people on and off the bikeway at those intersections without having conflicts with cars. So that's just another consideration to think about.
All right, great. Thanks, Emily, for that explanation. Okay, Libby, I think you're up. Maybe with our first group of comments or questions.
Great. Let's start with just some lighting comments and questions, since that follows up on the conversation we had with lighting from the first Q&A. So I'm just summarizing a few different people's comments. Some people are seeing benefits from lighting around the riparian trails with safety and comfort, but are also recognizing the negative impacts lighting will have on wildlife along the corridors. Can you talk about how the Central Bikeway will address those trade-offs if the Guadalupe River Trail is chosen as a preferred alignment?
Yeah, I think I can address what we've heard to date from the community. We've definitely heard a lot about safety as kind of a leading goal. One from the perspective of separation from cars, but also perceived safety along trails where there may be a large unhoused population, or it's dark and they don't feel safe at night. And so, that's always a trade-off when we're planning bikeways, to think about lighting in strategic places where we can maybe address some of those concerns, but also balance the needs of our other neighbors, which is, our friends that live in the natural environment as well. So while we haven't really to date kind of specified where lighting will be or how it will specifically be used, but we know that we need to think about it as part of a bicycle superhighway in strategic locations.
Mm-hmm. And I'll share another suggestion. Something that, has been used along other trail corridors is preemptive lighting sensors. So as you ride along a corridor, lights would start to come on and stay on for a minute while you ride through, and then they would turn off. So the lighting would follow ahead of you as the sensors would pick you up riding along the trail. So that's something else that can be considered.
All right. What's next?
Great. So we have some comments around the heading Taylor Maybury from an anonymous attendee who notes that while there are some safe sections to ride on, all alignments have areas that don't feel as safe, like the Taylor underpass under Caltrain and the heading connection to Maybury Road. So can we talk about how the Central Bikeway will address those gaps?
Yeah, great comments. I think particularly those areas that the individual is referring to are older grade separations, many of them that cross under the railroad tracks. They're very constrained spaces. And so some of the trade-offs that we have to think of for Central Highway to provide the experience and the amenities that a super highway defines are sometimes costly items like new bridges or new grade separations or tunnels to get us over or under barriers that exist today in our built environment. And some of the alternatives that we talked about tonight have more of those, like the trail trackway or the Walsh Wizard. Our alternative on El Camino and heading, the shortliner, has less of those, but it has other challenges like more intersections that would require other types of technologies or signal adjustments to help bicyclists get through those. So hopefully that kind of summarizes an answer to the summary of comments.
Yeah, and actually we have a lot of people curious about El Camino, which you just mentioned. So maybe we can dive into El Camino a little bit more. We have a number of questions asking.
Let's do that, and then we'll take a hand maybe after we talk about El Camino a little bit.
Perfect. Yeah. So yeah, we have a variety of folks, Bob, Keith, and some anonymous attendees asking questions around how we'll address driveway conflicts. Curious if there's enough right of way for the bikeway. And then if we're taking space from vehicles, will there be enough support for a bikeway on El Camino?
Great questions. I think I'll start, and then maybe Emily, you can address the driveways, and then Carol, if you'd like to provide anything we missed or perspective from the city, feel free to do so. But El Camino does have a lot of points of access. It has a lot of places that people want to go, and that's very appealing. The city of Santa Clara has identified it to have protected facilities on El Camino. And they do have a vision for the corridor that includes, enhanced bicycling, and we're definitely working with that as part of our vision for potentially a superhighway on El Camino. Emily, maybe you could talk about our driveway conflicts that do exist on El Camino and ways that maybe we can address it and make it more safer for people who are riding.
Yeah, certainly. So yeah, we're very aware when we're considering what this bike superhighway could look like along El Camino Real, and the benefits that you get into connecting to the destinations also provide a barrier in terms of all the interactions of the driveways. And so, the design solutions we're looking and exploring include options such as the bike superhighway being raised and at more of the sidewalk level, so that as it goes through driveways, cars, bikes, and pedestrians are more at an elevated condition and have a priority. So it's more like a speed hump as people have to exit through the driveways or enter into the driveways. Also providing clear sight lines and making sure that folks turning in and turning out of the driveways have plenty of clarity of folks riding along the bikeway, and also looking at pavement marking solutions to make sure that it's very noticeable that there are going to be people riding and walking through those driveways. There's also a potential to consider driveway consolidation. And so those are things that we'll be diving into in more detail if El Camino Real is selected as the preferred alignment.
Carol, would you like to share anything about the city's current process and what your vision is?
Actually, that'd be great. So yeah, just to let people know, we actually are in the midst of El Camino specific plan, and we just released the EIR for it, and we're hoping in the next month or two we'll actually finalize the specific plan. And we hope to take it to council for adoption around May of this year. But yes, in terms of the driveways, we understand that as well. And as part of this specific plan, we're hoping that we'll have a lot of redevelopment along El Camino, which includes more residential development. And so in the process, right now it's kind of more commercial than residential. And so when these parcels redevelop, we are hoping that there will be driveway you know, like minimize the amount of driveways on each property. So like Emily said, the consolidation, we're hoping that will happen as parcels redevelop.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that insight.
Mhm.
I know there was a question about whether, this could be supported. And, I don't know if we completely know the answer to that, but we're definitely asking tonight about people's preferences about how they may ride on a facility like El Camino. So I think your voice is part of that process and good for staff and our consultants and our policymakers who make the decisions, the ultimate decisions on some of these items. So I'll move over to our hands. It looks like Chris has his hand up. So go ahead, Chris, and unmute yourself. We do have only 10 minutes left, so if you could keep your question pretty brief, because we still have a lot of other written comments to get through as well. I'd appreciate it. Chris, we can't hear you yet. Oh, there you are.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the unmute button didn't come up. I have just two quick questions. One, what do you guys plan on doing about bike parking along the corridors? Because that wasn't really discussed in this meeting, and I know that would be important with like the link or like being able to park on the side of the street safely for people to also use it. And also, you guys mentioned raised platform. Are you considering anything like pedestrian bridges that would take you over multiple intersections on the bike path at all either, for the more heavily traveled that may go through places of trying to get in and out of where cars live a lot of now?
Great questions. So we didn't go a lot into what were barriers to bicycling, but we did ask questions in round one about that, and actually being able to park your bicycle at a destination was in our top 5 barriers that we heard from people about. So we're definitely considering areas or carve-outs along the bikeway where you would want to park your bicycle at a secure destination or near a doctor's appointment or a place that you need to go. So that's definitely something that we'll be looking at in our draft and final plans. And then with regards to raised platforms, we are looking at ways that we can provide access or separation for bicycles. Some of our alignments, like the trail trackway along Central Expressway, envisions potentially grade separation at major intersections. Our trail trackway also envisions potentially bridges that would connect you from, say, certain street facilities onto the freeway corridor so that you don't have to interact with traffic to make those movements. And then we've talked a lot about, as a team and with our partners and a little bit with the community, about pedestrian access. And some of the feedback we've shared or have received is that we, where there are major barriers to pedestrians today, and we may be envisioning facilities in the future, we're definitely considering access to pedestrians in those areas where it doesn't exist today and it makes sense to provide access to them in the future. But we do want to make sure that we can design it in a way where there's separation for both those users. All right, so thanks for that, Chris. Let's take a few more questions. We've got about 9 minutes left in our scheduled meeting time.
Great. So we have a question from an anonymous attendee asking, is there a potential conflict using creek trails, which are recreation in nature, with corridors, which are more commuter-based?
I think that's a great observation. So, our trail corridors today are really multi-use paths. So pedestrians and bicyclists share the same space. So we've heard a lot of comments about the cons to that, right? Bicyclists tend to generally want to go faster than people walking. There's more conflicts on trail-like settings. There are not a lot of places to merge or pass. And so we have to think about those things for a bicycle superhighway, which provides slightly different amenities, where we would want to separate those users and provide them their own spaces so we can minimize those conflicts. It might allow bikes to be a little bit quicker and travel safer, and also provide a space for pedestrians so that they don't have to worry about getting, elbowed or pushed out of the way by a bicycle. Anything you'd like to add, Emily?
Yeah, I just want to mention that, e-bikes are becoming more popular. And when we're looking for bike superhighway corridors, we're talking about, helping people travel much further distances on bikes. And e-bikes are, a technology that helps people expand their range while still using, a human-powered device. So, e-bikes do travel at a higher speed. So some of the concerns that Brent was mentioning, we're really taking those seriously because we want this to be able to serve users over time and to be able to sort of, be future-proof or be able to adapt as the human-powered devices evolve over time as well.
Okay, great observations, thoughts, everyone. Thank you.
Great. Well, we have just a series of general comments around the airport alignment, particularly the northern alignment. We have some comments from attendees with, suggesting that the northern alignment is a little bit unambitious because it doesn't do much to build new bikeways, and also that it doesn't connect to many places. So to bring up those comments, and then a question around that section is, if we do end up doing the north of the airport route and use the Guadalupe Trail, what will maintenance look like on that facility?
Yeah, great thoughts. So, the study area is made up of very different types of land uses. So in kind of North Santa Clara, we have more job centers, more industrial uses. In the southern part of Santa Clara in the study area along El Camino, we have more businesses, commercial, and residents. And then in San Jose, we have those kind of retail, kind of commercial corridors as well, and a lot of residential uses kind of out in the Berryessa neighborhood in East and North San Jose. And, we get this question about north of the airport, what's there? Who wants to go there? But the Northern Trail does set up users who may need to come from one end or the other and connect to this large job center that we have in North San Jose. There are a lot of jobs in North San Jose and North Santa Clara, and the northern option potentially sets people up for that. So while there may not, we're not making a stated preference, just a consideration for why we wanted to look at the northern alignment around the airport as well. I think the maintenance question is a great one. We will be, I don't have a specific answer for how these facilities will be maintained yet, but as part of the study, we'll be working on an implementation plan with all the partners. And I think that's one of the questions that we need to ask ourselves, is to make a really successful, joyful experience for people to move across the county. We need to come up with a solution to maintain these facilities as well. So we need to think about not only how we build them, but how do we fund the long-term maintenance and operations of these facilities. And hopefully that's something, or with some options that we can provide in our final study. So we haven't gotten there quite yet, but maybe later in the summer or later on in the project, we'll have some more thought around that for you all.
Great. Just want to highlight a couple of comments, just following up on the bike parking conversation. We have a couple folks who have been happy with the bike link blockers. So I just want to highlight that as a potential, a potential comment we heard from a couple people. And then,
so if I could just pause there, Libby. Yeah. So just for everyone's information, BikeLink is a technology that is a card, just like a credit card size. It has a chip in it, and it allows you to access a secured parking location for your bike. BikeLink is VTA's official vendor for our secure parking. We're trying to move our entire secure bike locker, all of our bike lockers over to eLink. That's a process that's going to take us a little bit more time, but this is a shared technology by many people in the Bay Area. So the city of San Jose, the county, BART, many users use BikeLink for secure bike parking. So it's becoming much more prevalent in the Bay Area.
Thank you for that great explanation of BikeLink. We have a comment from Kevin who says it was great when you were describing options to explain what is currently there and then what we would get with the project proposal. Would like to see focus and money on areas where there aren't any current trails or bike lanes available.
Okay, that's very helpful to know. So maybe focusing on alignments or places that don't have existing investment on them. I'm thinking of places like in Santa Clara in particular, Kiefer Walsh Central Expressway, or even El Camino, right, where there's no facilities today. So there are more elements of bikeways that exist in San Jose today, but almost all of the alignments, well, Caltrain corridor is another one, which we haven't discussed a lot about tonight either, but a lot of these roadways like Kiefer Walsh and El Camino are all identified, as I've mentioned before, in city's bike plans for, you know, being open or receptive to investment, or and are listed as priority corridors in the build out of their overall networks. So we're kind of trying to work with our partners to help enhance those corridors in a way, with the Central Bikeway. Partners, is there anything else anyone would like to add? Emily? All right, thanks for your feedback. Okay, we're going on maybe one more question, comment.
Yeah, we have a question asking specifically about the Alameda 880 interchange, if there would be improvements at that location.
Alameda 880, it's not jumping out in my head, but Emily, maybe you could help me focus on this one about what we're proposing here.
Sure. So for the purple line, the short liner, as the Alameda makes its way over to connect with Heading, there is a big freeway interchange there, and it's certainly something that we're thinking about and how that would go through there. We're exploring a number of different options, and as the bikeway interfaces with the interchange throughout the corridor, that's something that we're taking a serious look at. And, you know, Caltrans is one of our project partners. So I think that, you know, the goals of the project are to really provide a separated protected facility. And we understand that at all these interchanges that we're planning to pass through, some significant changes would likely need to be made.
All right, that's great. Okay, well, we are at time tonight. So much great feedback from you all. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate you spending an evening with us. We know you all have families and we all have very busy lives. This really helps us plan for the future of how we want to move in our county. And we hope one day that we could, you know, maybe ride and envision ourselves on a bicycle superhighway like Central. So if you have more feedback, please email community.outreach@bta.org. Give us a call. Go to our website, bta.org/Central Bikeway to fill out our survey. It will be open for a few more weeks. And if you would like us to come to you, let us know. So I think with that, we'll wrap up. Give yourself some pats on the back. and have a good evening. Take care, everyone.